Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with landings in the Admiralty Islands. We're now on to, just making sure, another Stepping Stone Falls, March 22nd, 1944. Harbingers of victory. Far below this U.S. Navy Dauntless dive bomber, an aircraft carrier sweeps about in a sharp turn in the Pacific, heading with other ships of a powerful task force for the Japanese-held Emiral Islands. At the scheduled time, the task force reached its goal. The planes dived and bomb ships' guns thundered. Marines landed, and before nightfall, the island was ours. Yeah, aircraft carriers, start to prove their kind of worth here in this war, really. Before this war, it was always thought battleships, big guns on the sea. That was always thought. But airships kind of take the place of that. So aircraft carriers become way more useful. And today, they are dominant. That's why the U.S. has, I think, 7 or 8. But they have a lot. The Allies lose a colorful figure. March 24th, 1944. Killed in action. Major General Ord Charles Wingate, leader of the Imperial Airborne Commando Forces in Burma, was killed when the plane in which he was riding crashed in the Burma jungle. One of the most colorful figures in modern warfare. His fabulous exploits with airborne troops landed behind the Japanese lines in the jungle had established him as the Lawrence of Arabia of this war. It's funny that they mention that because I bet many people don't even remember this guy very much. But they remember Lawrence of Arabia, and I think for him it was more just the name. But yeah, this guy was a neat figure, and it's kind of cool what they're showing him here with. But yeah, he was a neat guy. Very colorful, that's for sure. Supplies for Anzio. March 24th, 1944. On the Anzio beachhead. Meanwhile, the slow progress on the Anzio beachhead had been causing considerable anxiety in some quarters. Although the official report had stated that the situation was well in hand, the Germans continued to launch heavy attacks with great frequency, and on March 24th, they resorted again to long-range shelling. There were several sharp artillery duels, and although 2 strong enemy patrols were destroyed while attempting to filter through the Allied lines, bad weather conditions prevented very much patrolling activities on either side. There was considerable aerial activity over the Anzio front. Warhawks and Thunderbolts attacked enemy gun positions, ammunition dumps, and other targets. Strong Luftwaffe opposition was met. On March 27th, 5 enemy machines were destroyed when the enemy made an unsuccessful raid on the port of Anzio. There were no Allied losses. The next day, the Germans made a further attack and bombed 2 hospitals. The casualties amounted to 8 killed and 70 wounded. But in the meantime, the enemy was unable to prevent the steady flow of war materials coming into the beachhead, and ships continued to arrive at Anzio Harbor in spite of attacks by U-boats, fighter bombers, and radio-controlled glide bombers. Owing to the extensive demolitions around the harbor, supply ships had to anchor offshore and unload their cargoes onto ducks and landing craft. The picture shows the inner harbor of Anzio, where 2 landing craft are unloading. In the background can be seen some of the buildings damaged by heavy shell fire and aerial bombardment. So yeah, we can see right here, the ships dropping off supplies. And yeah, there's the damaged buildings, as they said. You can see there's a lot of rubble. So they have clearly been hit pretty hard. The Nazis flood Holland. The Germans it's over here. March 24th, 1944. The Germans prepare for invasion. Land which had been drained and cultivated by the Dutch over a period of centuries was ruined for years to come by German defense methods, as shown in these pictures released by the Dutch underground. So far, only a little land had been inundated, the Dutch reported, in the area north of Amsterdam, but civilians were being evacuated in other districts below water level. If the Nazis were to carry out the project totally, they could undo the work of more than 2 centuries in reclaiming land from the sea. To flood the land with salt water would ruin the topsoil upon which nearly 4 million Hollanders depended for their livelihood. The Dutch also reported that Marshal Rommel had set up his headquarters at Breda. You can see heavily flooded areas. And yeah, obviously, if you can flood it, you're going to flood it. Slows down the Allies. They can't land in the Netherlands, really. But they're not wrong, though. Obviously, they're very kind of right here. The Germans are destroying thousands of square mile, well, not really thousands, but a lot of square mileage of land here. And they're just kind of, oh, well, whatever, but this is a big deal. And at least it wasn't completely destroyed. And if anyone could reclaim the land again, as long as the soil isn't ruined, it's definitely the Dutch. They're very good at reclaiming land. That is for sure. If they were allowed, they would reclaim all of what used to be Doggerland if they could, but they probably won't be allowed to. Beautiful and treacherous foe in Italy. March 24th, 1944. Disappointment in Italy. During the last week in March, the situation in Italy was anything but encouraging. The offensive against Cassino, which began on the 14th and was followed by the obliteration air raid, was conceded to be a failure. The attack had dwindled away into artillery exchanges. Germany regained control of the slopes of Mount Cassino. Indian Gurkha troops, which had been isolated on Hangman's Hill, were withdrawn. It was useless to keep on supplying them by air after the rest of the offensive had subsided. The Nazis still blocked the road to Rome, as they had been doing for 2 months. The outlook was equally discouraging on the Anzio beachhead, below Rome. 2 months of grim, costly fighting had gained little ground, and on the 8th Army front, after months of plowing through mud and rain, the Allies had to contend with equally treacherous snow. Lofty white peaks, such as the ones facing the 8th Army fighters in the picture provided naturally defensive barriers for the enemy, who had the weatherman on his side ever since the start of the Allied campaign in Italy. So yeah, you can see the mountains here, and it's just snow-covered everywhere. And yeah, the weather is going to hold up the Allies quite a bit. It's kind of ironic in some regard. So you have the weather very much hurt the Germans in the Soviet Union, but then in Italy, it helps him and kind of shows. Sorry about that. It kind of shows that if you're on the defensive with bad weather, you got a little bit of a better chance than if you're on the offensive. The offensive fronts here have been awful, and they're not going to get any better. This is basically a failed operation at this point, to some degree. They did conquer a decent bit of southern Italy, but it doesn't matter. If they can't get to Rome, who cares? That's basically the idea here. And it allows for the American plan that the American High Command really wanted. The Brits were the one that really wanted to go through Italy. It was always seen as the soft underbelly. And to a degree it was. If the Italians were the only one defending here, this would have been taken by now. But the Germans shore up defenses pretty well. And they hold off the Allies for a long time. But with that, that's going to do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a comment. Tell me what I could improve on. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.